You're listening to the Balanced Educator podcast, episode number 47.
Welcome to the Balanced Educator. We're your hosts, Kaylee
and Josiane from Educalm. Our intention is to equip and empower you to feel more calm, balanced, and joyful in all aspects of your life. Hey everyone, welcome to the Balanced Educator podcast. We're so happy you're here. Welcome to new listeners, people who have been listening for a while. Welcome to all. Now, if you haven't done so yet, we invite you to subscribe on iTunes. And also, if you're loving the show, please go ahead and leave a review. Your reviews mean the world to us. And they are really helping us in achieving our goals for the year. And by the year, I mean the September to September year, because we're teachers. So that's kind of often how we look at our year. So when we made goals in August, one of our goals was to grow our podcast listenership. So your reviews are really helping us to reach that. So thank you so much. Now, today we're interviewing Amanda Warren, and Amanda Warren is an Educalm Teacher alumni and an Educalm classroom teacher. She lives in a small town in Vermont with her husband and their 1-year-old kiddo, Hattie. Amanda is co-director and a teacher at Bridge School, a small independent elementary school that focus on the 4 key values of community, creativity, exploration, and communication. Amanda studies conservation, biology, and education at Middlebury College and has a master's in education in elementary education from Lesley University. When not at school, Amanda can be found training for marathons, birding, and serving as vice president of the board of directors at her local natural foods co-op. So this interview is so awesome, and it's interesting because Amanda brings in this different perspective that Kaylee and I, as public Canadian school teachers, just don't like. It's just not a part of our world. So stay tuned. This interview is awesome. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to say that our online workshops that we had last week were just awesome. Like, you guys' participation and this community is just so great, and it was so fun to chat with you guys and to get to know you on the webinar. So thank you so much to all that came. Those were our last online workshops for 2018, and so excited for 2019 because we are starting the year off perfect New Year's resolution with the Educalm Teacher course. This course will run from January 14th, 2019 to February 7th, 2019. And in this course to become a balanced educator, you will gain tools to develop habits to prevent overwhelm and burnout. You will gain a better work-life balance, and you will feel more joy in and out of the classroom. So this course will be taught live online on Mondays and Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central Time. And all sessions will be recorded so that you have a lifetime access to the recorded lessons and coaching calls in case you can't participate live or if you want to rewatch the content later. Our Educalm Teacher alumni had so many good things to say that we had to bring this course back. And what is awesome is that anytime that we put on this course again, any of the alumni that took the course previously get to join us again and take it again with an expanding, growing community of like-minded educators. Like, how awesome is that? So in this 4-week Educalm Teacher course, there will be, again, the Monday lessons, the Thursday coaching calls. There will be 4 guided mindfulness practices that will fit in perfectly with what you are learning that week. There will be bonus morning and bedtime guided mindfulness audios. And actually, Amanda in this interview talks about the morning one. So you'll hear all about that. There, you also have private access to a private Educalm Facebook group, and we have Facebook Live meetings on a monthly basis. So it's like once you take Educalm Teacher, like it continues. You continue to have access to the community. You continue to be able to develop yourself personally and professionally with our support. You will also have access to the Intro to Mindfulness course for you and your students for free, because we know that once you learn all this stuff for yourself, you're going to want to learn or teach it to your students. You will also have 20% off all of our Educalm online products. And again, a lifetime access to the curriculum and all future rounds of live Educalm Teacher courses. And today, Amanda will talk a little bit about what she took away from this course and who this course is perfect for. So before we get started with this interview with Amanda, I just wanted to let you know that enrollment for Educalm Teacher will be open until January 10th. So registration closes on January 10th and we get started on the 14th. So if you're interested in this course, or even if you just want to see more information, see some testimonials from teachers that took it in August, you can go to www.educalm.com/teacher. And Educalm is spelled EDUCALME. We've already welcomed quite a few teachers into this course, and we're just so excited to get to know you. So, now enough of me talking. Let's get on with the show.
All right. Hello there, Amanda. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me on.
Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Amanda Warren, and I live in a small town in Vermont called Middlebury. And for those Canadians of you out there, we're about 2.5 hours south of Montreal. And I am one of the directors and a teacher at a small independent, or also known as a private school. We are kindergarten through 6th grade, and we only have 20 students in our entire school. So it's a really small and beautiful way for children to grow up. And outside of school, I live in an old farmhouse with my husband and our 1-year-old kiddo, Hattie. And I love to run and bird and cook. And when I'm not at school, I am the vice president of our board of directors of our local natural foods co-op. So I kind of like all things sort of stereotypically Vermont, kind of rural living.
That sounds awesome. Just by your list of interests, it sounds like you live a pretty well-balanced lifestyle.
Well, I try. I really try. But, we could always find more balance. But yeah, it's wonderful because I live really close to my school. And so I can actually see it out my kitchen window across the valley. And we live really close to our food co-op. So I just feel like we've created this really intentional lifestyle of just, being kind of close to the things that we need to be close to and having a really wonderful community here. I'm trying to convince my parents to move here too. So really just setting everything up for the long haul.
That is so awesome. So can you tell me a little bit more about your school? I find it so interesting that you have such a small school and you wear a lot of hats in your school. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and it's alternative by US standards as well, but I know, in Canada it's a little less common to have private schools, but so we're an independent school, so we have no affiliation with any of the local school districts and we receive no funding of any kind, unless we get grant money through certain state programs, but that would be unusual. So all of our students are there by tuition, but we do have scholarships. So about 50% of our kids are on financial aid of some kind, and we do a lot of fundraising specifically for that. So what it allows us to do as an independent school is to be really flexible and nimble and be just that. We're independent. So we structure our curriculum so that our students are ready to graduate and assimilate into a traditional middle school. The vast majority of our kids end up in the public middle school and then high school system, and they do fabulously well. So our school is very much informed by state and national standards and, of course, by best practices in teaching and learning. But what we can do is just take a different path as to how we get to those outcomes. So in particular, we focus on a mixed aged learning environment and a really flexible learning environment in terms of where students are in their path to graduation. So we say that you're a kindergartner if you're in kindergarten, and we say that you're in sixth grade if you're in sixth grade, but anywhere in the middle, we don't say what grade that a student is in. I think the kids all know pretty much, where they would be if they were in a more traditional school, but we don't have just, a grade 1 class where it's all grade 1 students learning math together and then a grade 2 class. It's more mixed. So my language arts class, for example, is all the 5th and 6th graders, but then there's a 4th grader who is ready for that level of challenge, so he's in there. And then similarly, I teach a math class that is the 2nd and 3rd graders, but then again, a couple of 4th graders that need a little extra time. And that's also another unusual thing, is that I get to teach different grade levels throughout the day. So it gives the kids a chance to be fresh and me a chance to be fresh. I have my classroom and then the kids come and go. So they're moving around the building. They're experiencing different classrooms and different teachers and not getting that kind of stale feeling. And then the other really magical thing is that because we're such a small school with a small teaching team, we know all the kids super, super well. I always joke that I know all my students. I know their grandparents and their pets and, everything about them. And I get to see them grow. This is my 4th year at my school. So, I'm seeing kids graduate this year that were pretty little kids when they first started. And to be able to see that growth over time is just really exciting from the teaching perspective. I feel like, and when I was teaching in more traditional schools before, I would finally, crack the nut on a certain kid's learning style, and then the year would be over and they would move on. But in this model, I can kind of loop with kids for a couple years. And especially that kiddo I have now who's in 4th grader in language arts, I'm thinking about where he's going to be, in 3 years out. So it really gives me a really deep opportunity to connect with him as a learner. And get to see where he wants to go. So we always say we're very nimble. So we can be kind of flexible and nimble depending on what the kids are interested in learning at a certain time or what the teachers are interested in learning. And we don't have to be as rigid.
That sounds amazing. I'm have goosebumps just thinking about how deep of a connection that you must be making with all of your students, which is so, so, so important in the learning journey for a student, is feeling comfortable with their teachers and the fact that you know them over time. And you said it's so true by the end of the year or in high school, the end of the semester, it's like you've just figured out how to really meet their needs, and then they're on to the next grade. And it's like,
Exactly.
So that's so neat.
And we can be flexible depending on what the kind of curriculum needs are for those kids at any time or what they're interested in. So, for example, this last year, we were planning ahead and thinking about kind of the year we'd had last year. And as teachers, we sat down and said, I think our kids could really benefit from studying the concept of identity. What does it mean for kids to be themselves? Who are they? Who are we as a school community? And then who are we as a broader community as this town of Middlebury. And so, that's not a state standard. That's not being passed top down onto us. It came organically through some stuff that was going on in our school. And we've been able to really dive into it. So the kids made masks that expressed their outward identity and what they wanted to show to the world. And then we did exercises where they got to kind of think about who they are on the inside. It's not something that's like, oh, it's one of our 4 to 5 topics that we cover in this loop. It just came out based on what was happening in that moment, and we might never come back to it, or we might. Another example I love is that when, I don't know if fidget spinners were popular in Canada.
Oh, yes.
But they came to Middlebury, and they were coming into school every day. And a lot of schools in our area banned them because they could be distracting. But instead of just sort of banning them and having it be a top down, no kids, you can't have them, they have to stay home, we took a pause and we said, wow, it really looks like the kids are interested in these because they're bringing them to school. And if they're interested in them, let's talk about them. Let's use them in our class. So first we used it as an opportunity for kind of just learning the social dynamics of having something in class that could be a little distracting. So we talked about what does it look like for it to be a tool for learning versus a toy. And we gave kids the responsibility of having them and using them. And then I actually happened to be teaching a unit on potential and kinetic energy. And I had this whole, unit planned, but it was kind of magical that all of a sudden fidget spinners were there. So I threw out all my, experiments that we were going to do. And we just used fidget spinners to study those concepts. And then I had the kids design their own experiment that they wanted to see. They wanted to answer some question about a fidget spinner, and some of them wanted to alter the design and build their own. And I just was so appreciative that I didn't have to, just make a top-down decision, oh, this has to go because it's not fitting in with our plan. We could alter the plan based on what the kids were interested in.
That sounds amazing. So now I'm curious, you said that you've taught in both a traditional kind of school and then now your more non-traditional school. What would you say are kind of the challenges to this style of school compared to your regular style of school?
Yeah, well, I like you taught science before, and in my previous school before this one, I taught 3 sections of 6th grade and 4 sections of 5th grade science. So I really only had 2 preps per day. And, sometimes I felt a little bit like a tape recorder. I would press play and do my lesson multiple times. And so in some ways that was quote unquote easier because, I had less prep. I was really familiar with the content. And I could anticipate exactly what questions the students were going to ask. And the kids were all the same age for the most part. And so it was just a little bit more predictable, although we all know working with humans and children is never predictable.
Yeah.
Whereas now I am teaching completely different things throughout the day. And so that's both a challenge and a positive part of my day. Because, sometimes I felt like by the 4th time I taught my lesson with my 5th graders, I was quite frankly, a little bored of it. So sometimes it's really nice that I'm completely changing things up throughout the day. But it can be a challenge if you find something that goes really well, like these kids that I've looped with 3 times in my language arts class. Sometimes we read a novel in one year and then I think, wow, this would be so fun. I think kids could really benefit from it in the future, but I have to wait several years before I can do it again. So it keeps me honest and keeps me on my toes, but it can be a challenge. And of course, meeting every kid's needs, even in a small school, there's only between, 7 to 12, depending on the class, kids in my class. And especially if they're different ages and, they have different levels of experience, that can be a challenge. But I found that was kind of exactly the same as when I was in a more traditional school. I also taught first grade, and I had the same experience where technically my kids were all first grade, but they had math readinesses that ranged from K through 3, or maybe a high 2. So it was sort of the same experience, but just the structure didn't allow me to move outside of that. Whereas now, we have a student who came in as a third grader who was ready for sixth grade math. And so he just went right in and was in the sixth grade, the highest level math class. And it just wasn't really an issue. He just flowed right into that. So, like anything, there's pros and cons. But so far, I've worked in a couple, different school settings, public schools here in Vermont, private schools in bigger cities. I studied abroad in South Africa and taught in some really, totally different school contexts there. But so far, this has been the one that really aligns with me the most and has been the most fun and interesting.
It sounds amazing. I would love to come visit one day just to see how it works.
Yeah, I think like kooky is definitely a word that I use to describe it, because when people come visit, kids are moving throughout the building. We have free transitioning. We don't line them up and move them from classroom to classroom. So it can be a little kooky as you see kids kind of doing their own thing, but it's pretty cool because even starting in kindergarten, they almost are like middle schoolers having their independent schedule, and their schedule might be different than another student who's their same age because they might be on a different math or language arts level. So it's pretty fun to see them just doing their own thing.
So how do you train essentially the younger kids to know where to go and where to be?
It's a good question. Well, the school's pretty small. It's actually in an old converted dairy barn. So it's only one level. So there's not a lot of places they can go. But it's also a big part of it's more training the older students to be mentors and guides. So when our students get to the sixth grade level, they really take that responsibility very seriously, and they really mentor the younger kids. And we have morning meeting all together as a whole school, 3 mornings of the week. 2 mornings of the week we do Educalm, but smaller groups, but 3 mornings a week we have it all the whole school, and you'll see the older students with a younger kid in their lap, and out on the playground, same thing. You see them playing together, and we do some more kind of intentional buddies and reading, but really a lot of it is organic, and it really works. And that was a big question that I had too, how are these kids really connecting at these different levels? Because we're so trained in our kind of traditional school model of all kids of the same ages being together. But I had a kind of an interview with one of my students before parent-teacher conferences, and I was saying, who are you close with this year? Who are you considering your friends? And he literally listed kids who were in grades K to 6. And there was one point where I stopped. I said, "You mean that student who's 5?" And he said, yeah, he's my really close friend this year. And he was totally genuine in it. And it's just so exciting to see them in this really much more kind of democratic, authentic learning environment where they're picking social cues up from older kids and kind of seeing the way things work from a range of different people.
That is so neat. So tell me how the Educalm practice is going, and be honest.
Yeah, it's been such a positive aspect of our school where, since it's not my just one classroom, so it's a little different than probably a lot of the other teachers who are using it, because there's only 20 kids in the whole school, so I'm able to kind of have all the kids use it in all the different grades. So I have a background in mindfulness, and I got my yoga teacher training certification, and have dabbled in different meditations throughout high school, college, and beyond. And I had tried several times to bring it into my classroom. And it was really interesting because I would try, but I also felt some really big resistance. And I feel like part of it was that I had kind of done my yoga teacher training in a summer outside of school, and it felt like it was my sort of, quote unquote self-care in a lot of ways. And it was like my thing. And another friend of mine who I teach with, did some yoga with students one time, and she's like, it's ruined it for me. I have to go home and do my own yoga practice because, they were so, distracted that day and they weren't that interested in doing it. And, it's frustrating. So it was interesting to just observe in myself that I had this kind of like, I don't even want to bring it into the classroom because it's my thing. And when I would try to do it, I would notice that the kids, they weren't really interested in just hearing my voice again. They were hearing me give directions all throughout the day. And this was just felt like sort of another list of directions that Amanda was giving them. And so when I heard about Educalm, I thought, this is really, I heard about Educalm Classroom first, and I thought, okay, we should really bring this into school because it's kind of, it could provide this more comprehensive and kind of outsider's voice. And that's what I found the kids really respond to, is the ritual aspect of it. So we right now are only doing it 2 to 3 mornings a week. I'd love for it to get to 5, but there's only so many things you can do in a day. But so they have the ritual of, we sit in the same place in the same circle, and they love the little jingle at the beginning. They always like strum on their air guitars.
The kids love doing the air ukulele.
And that's kind of their cue, as we talked about in Educalm Teacher, their cue to kind of settle in. And I have been so excited to see them just get into the routine pretty quickly. And it's at the point now where I can fully kind of close my eyes and participate in the practice with them. And I think that it helps them to see me engaging with it and having it be fresh and new kind of for all of us. So my co-teacher, teachers and I will sit and do the meditation with the students, and then we'll go around and share at the end. And sometimes we're sharing totally authentic experiences that we had where, I heard this car outside and it distracted me, or I had this big breakthrough when when Kaylee said this or something. We say, oh, Kaylee said this.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's been really exciting to see them just settle into that ritual. And then we've also really loved the posters with the different strategies on them, because we have them in all of our different classrooms. And so that can be a challenge for students, thinking about how to manage expectations for them and for teachers when they're moving to different adults throughout the day and with different kids. And so having those kind of consistent strategies posted in a lot of different places throughout school helps keep things consistent. And knowing that, all the different teachers understand 5-finger breathing and we're all doing it at different times of day also helps kind of cement it in their minds a little bit better, because it's not just in that one isolated setting. And we're starting to see the kids do it on their own now, which is
that's
so
the best part. Hey,
I had this moment in my math class last week recently where it was just getting a little bit frazzled. And so instead of ringing my chime or trying to get their attention, I took a suggestion from you guys and I just did one hand on my heart and one hand on my belly, and I just was breathing. And then I looked over and one of the kids had his hand up breathing with 5-finger breathing. And I was like, yes, this is the best.
That is so awesome. I had an experience kind of like that, one of those moments that you're like, yes, it's sinking in. We had parent teacher this past week. And so it was like, a portfolio night. So the students and the parents came together. And we were talking, one of my students, with his mom, we were talking about what his goals are for this next term. And he said that his goals were to use strategies, Educalm strategies, when he starts feeling frustrated. Yeah. And then his mom was like, oh, so what's that? And he says, well, I can use 5-finger breathing when I start getting worried, because he easily gets worried about not doing well on things, and kind of shuts down. So just to see him articulate that without me even having suggested it or his mom having suggested it, I was like, oh, yes, this is why we do this.
Yeah, I had a student who we were actually sharing gratitude, and she shared gratitude for me, which was like, I don't even expect that. But then the thing she shared it for was, I'm grateful for Amanda because she introduced mindfulness. And last night I found a guided mindfulness on YouTube and I did it before bed and it helped me fall asleep. And I was like, you don't need to, I appreciate that, but don't worry about it. But also so cool that you're finding this now outside of school on your own and having your own experience with it. So that's been really fun.
That is so cool. So you've done your yoga teacher training, you have mindfulness training, and you're also an Educalm Teacher alumni. So I'm curious, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but what was it that made you decide to take the Educalm Teacher course when you already had this training?
It's a good question. What was exactly the spark and the light bulb? I think I just have the interest. And so I'm always looking for more ways to bring balance and mindfulness into my life. And my teacher training was more geared towards, I kind of got into yoga more because of my life as an athlete. And so the presence and mindfulness and breath were such, they're very transferable, but it kind of occupied this space in my brain that was like, oh, this is my athletic part. And of course, through my yoga teacher training, I was exposed to tons of different kinds of yoga and got, although I came in for sort of the physical aspect of it, I came away with so much more. But I was looking for really much more concrete strategies about what does this actually look like in the daily life as a teacher? Because, I can't duck out at noon to go to the yoga class in the middle of the day. And it's hard to even, find the couple minutes to do your own personal meditation during the day. And I had experimented with different things like, during my lunch break, taking the 5 minutes to turn out all the lights in my room and legs up at the wall and do some breathing. And I'd experimented with a couple of different things, but it just kind of felt like things weren't sticking and things weren't working. So I loved the idea of being able to kind of get the bundle of Educalm Teacher and then Educalm Classroom, and have it be something that I was doing really with my students and kind of authentically learning with them. I also knew that you guys were really into the kind of neuroscience part of it. And so that really spoke to me because as, I teach more than just science now, but as a science major in college and then, previous science teacher, that really spoke to me.
So after taking the course, how has this year been different than previous years for you?
Today was a really good example of how it's different. So I don't have kind of a set in stone mindfulness practice because I do have a 1-year-old. So anything that's routine can be a little bit challenging. Yeah. But my kiddo happened to sleep in a little bit this morning and I woke up a little early. So I thought, I have a couple minutes. And I've been really loving in the Educalm Teacher, there's a guided mindfulness practice that's today is going to be an awesome day. And I really love that one. So I kind of sat in my living room and we have, the holiday lights up and kept it kind of dim. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to really get into the mindset of this really calm, wonderful morning and did the quick guided mindfulness practice. And then from the minute I got to school is one of those days where I don't know if Mercury's in retrograde or something, but nothing was going right. Our internet was broken entirely. I had an unexpected visitor during which is supposed to be my break. And so I didn't get my break. And then we had a tour for a prospective family and they came 35 minutes early and I had a meeting off campus. Everything was kind of going a little bit kooky. And this little part of my brain was like, I can't believe this is happening. I did my mindfulness practice this morning. And then I thought, no, I did my mindfulness practice this morning. And now I'm just kind of rolling through these punches without a story or, playing some kind of victim or something like that. I was able to just kind of ride the wave of the day and kind of alter my course as it went. And I think that's been a big change for me is kind of being able to talk to more teachers and through the Educalm Teacher and realize that, your mindfulness practice doesn't have to be set in stone. It's about being mindful, which means about being present. And so it can fluctuate throughout the day. And then the morning routine concept has been big for me and the teachers that I've shared it with. And then actually sharing it with my students has been such a really powerful part of that kind of shared experience. So again, I don't have a particular, oh, I do this every single day before school, but I'm just much more thoughtful and mindful about how I start my day before school. So my kind of routine is to make sure that I really have a few minutes to connect and play with my kid before heading into school so that I feel really connected to her, because it's hard to be away from her during the day. So I love starting our day together, kind of giggling and reading stories, and she's in such a good mood in the morning. And so I'm able to then share that experience with my students. Like I have a student in 6th grade who had been kind of grumpy, quite frankly, in the mornings and kind of coming in a rush and, like backpack spewing everywhere. And my co-teacher and I kind of had a sit down with him one morning, and with his mom too. And he said, kind of what's going on with you? And we talked about how he was kind of showing up to school not being his best self. And I shared the concept of the morning routine. And he said, well, I have kind of a bedtime routine already where I drink chamomile tea and I try to read and write. And I said, oh my gosh, so you already get it. So, his mom was there. And then we talked about kind of expanding that, or just really honing in on making sure he was doing his bedtime routine. And then he's decided that he is going to make sure he plays some piano before coming into school in the morning. I think he had another tea that he was drinking in the morning. And so it just felt like that, again, that kind of connection and that shared experience of I'm going through it too. We're all coming to school. We all kind of have to, get ourselves out the door in the morning, and how can we show up at school and be our best selves? And we actually have a time in our day where it's right after morning meeting before our first class. We have a time for the students to make a choice and do an activity that they want to do. And so I'm able to frame it in that way again of, okay, how do you want to start your day? Do you want to start your day in kind of a more big energy, playing basketball in the gym kind of mood? Or do you want to read quietly by yourself? But you set yourself up for success today.
What a beautiful gift to give your students, to allow them to make that choice of how do they want to set up their best day. That gave me goosebumps. I love that you took what you've learned from the course and transferred that right into your teaching and right into how you're creating your day, the day for your students. That's amazing.
Yeah. And it's fun because, again, we're having that. I can talk about, I didn't get to play with my kid this morning, or, this happened, but today's a new day and I get to start again. And having that shared vocabulary, I feel like has also, kind of improved my mood and mindset, that it's not this like secret thing that I am, I'm not this kind of quirky, funky person who's trying to do her mindfulness practice before school, or, now that our whole school is on board, it just feels really great.
That is wonderful. So from your experience in the Educalm Teacher course, it's a 4-week course. So we had 4 different modules and the coaching calls throughout, and time to connect with the other Educalm teachers in the chat during the lessons and during the coaching calls. What would you say is your biggest takeaway from the course?
I think the neuroscience and having the language to describe it to the kids has been really helpful, and that sort of the teachered version that you gave to us, and then the kind of through your podcast too of how to explain it to the kids has been huge. Because before you guys came out with Educalm Classroom and Educalm Teacher, I had been learning a lot of the same concepts myself and reading a lot of the same stuff that you guys had been reading. And I kept thinking, I really want to figure out how to share this with my students, but I hadn't created the time to create all of these amazing resources. And then you guys did. So, like, for example, the other day we had a couple of younger students who had gotten into a conflict, and what happened exactly? One of them was upset, and she was using I feel statements, which was really cool. But she was saying, I feel mad and I'm never going to feel happy ever again. And we would say, say a lot, well, when you're ready and when you have a calm body and you're ready to choose another emotion, I'm ready, I'm ready to help and talk to you. And she said, I can't choose my emotions. My emotions just come to me. They just happen. I have no control over them. I was like, ha ha ha. Oh, you asked for a neuroscience lesson right now? Oh, I would love to talk to you about how, your mind creates these little keys and how they lock into your cells, and just having that language, both for myself, understanding so that if a big emotion comes up for me, I'm thinking, I know exactly what's happening in my body. And then that helps me kind of get out of myself a little bit and realize this isn't just me. This is just the way that the mind works and the body works. And this is just part of our systems. And okay, now I'm going to move through it. And then being able to kind of turn around and teach that to the kids was so fun. Maybe she wasn't super receptive in that moment to it. But just having that language so that we can, again and again, come back to it. Because emotional learning is a huge part of our curriculum. Obviously being such a small school, we do a ton of emotion coaching, a ton of work on them understanding themselves on a really deep level. And so having kind of what we're saying be reinforced through the mindfulness practices and through the different posters and strategies has been great, because then they see it from all these different angles. And I've seen changes this year already in just their ability to kind of verbalize their feelings and emotions, which has been really, really positive to see.
That is so wonderful. So last question, who would you recommend Educalm Teacher to? Who is this course good for?
I think it's really good for, I don't want to sound too cheesy, but for anyone, I was listening to the podcast that you released today, which was with a different teacher who'd been in the course with me this summer, and she was a first year teacher. And so I thought, of course, oh my gosh, I would have loved to have this in my first year teaching. But I've been sharing some of the concepts and some of the teacher recordings with, my coworkers who are 17, 20 years in, and they're getting a lot out of it as well. So I think it's really good for anybody in your kind of teaching trajectory. And also I totally echo what was on the podcast today, where Renee was saying, it's really good for anybody who has a job or really, is in the world. But particularly anybody, who works with people throughout the day, because you can kind of, just learning about how the mind and emotions works is so, so helpful. But I think any grades, I could see it being applicable to anyone, even in early childhood. Even though your modules aren't particularly explicitly designed for early childhood, just having the teachers have that concept. But I'm a little tired of the kind of the sort of stereotypes of the teachers who are like burnt out and overworked. And, I'm tired of that like stereotype of first year teachers being so strung out. And so I would love for more teachers to kind of get on board and kind of change this narrative of, if we learn about how to manage our energy rather than just kind of trying to obsessively manage our time, really a lot is possible.
Can you go a little bit deeper in that, managing your energy rather than managing your time? Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, this is something I'm really working on. I think you never really arrive. I don't know, maybe Eckhart Tolle got there. But I think, no, I used to really focus on, okay, if I can just hone in on my schedule and really fit everything in and, be more intentional about my 5 minutes for this and my 10 minutes for this. If I can just crack this nut of my time management and my schedule, then I'll solve how to be a teacher. If I figure out that like secret tool to the no prep lesson or the grading, that never happens, then it'll be perfect. But this year I've really embraced the mentality of it's really about the story that I'm putting on what's happening around me and that I have control of that. So what I'm working on right now in my own life is my email inbox, which I feel like is such a cliche, but instead of I'm not going to get wrapped up in the story of it. Never mind. But I haven't been able to keep up on my inbox as much. And so instead of saying to myself, oh, okay, well, if I just, carve out this 15-minute period after school, then it'll all the problem will be solved. I've just been saying to myself, the work that needs to get done is going to get done. And if I am in the right mindset when I sit down to do those emails, it's going to happen a lot faster. So, and maybe not necessarily faster, but a lot more easily. So, similarly, with my classroom and with my students, it's not about breaking down that lesson to getting it to exactly flow perfectly in my brain ahead of time. It's being confident enough to kind of flow with the energy of the class, and confident enough in your own energy. And, again, having, your cup, everyone always says, but so true, having your cup filled first so that you have the energy to share with other students or with your students and with your school. So yeah, it's a practice for sure, but it's one that I have seen, I guess it's only December. Maybe it's already December, but I have seen a difference in my own mindset as a teacher, kind of hoping or honing in that strategy.
That is awesome. That is something that we're always practicing for ourselves too, Josiane and I, and, making sure that we fill our cup first and feel as good as we can before we get down to business, because it just flows so much more joyfully. And when you're as best as you can, I mean, not every day is perfect, of course, but if you can feel good first, things are more fun. So it flows more easily, and it just, it just feels like less painful and more fun, which is
yeah. And I've been trying to share it with my students too. Like, I was working on a project with my class the other day, and a kid was kind of at a roadblock, and I said, hey, you're on the computer, you have 5 minutes to do whatever you want within obviously school appropriate reason. And he said, really? And I said, yeah, you can watch some soccer videos if you want. And so for 5 minutes, he watched his soccer videos, and I was like, are you in a better mood now? Maybe can we move a little bit more forward with the project? And, it wasn't like an exact light bulb moment where, of course, then it was perfect. But I feel like the idea of just reminding him that, yeah, he's in charge of his energy. He's in charge of his thoughts. He can make the decision to take those few minutes to do something that feels really fun and good for him. So then he's in that right mood to work on the project.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences and about your school. I'm sure people are going to want to learn more about your school after this. Can you tell us where we can find out more?
Yeah. So our website is Bridge School Vermont, all spelled out. So VERMONT, all spelled out. .org. So bridgeschoolvermont.org. So we have a website there. We're also on Facebook. It's all linked through our website. So we're on Facebook and Instagram, all linked through that, but it's the same handle everywhere, Bridge School Vermont.
That is wonderful. And if anyone wants to reach out to you because they have questions, can they do that?
Yeah, you can find me through the school website. That would probably be the best way to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing your story and chatting with us today.
Well, thank you for creating all the resources. They've really been a joy and a light for us this year. So we're so appreciative.
Oh, you're welcome.
How great was that interview? I just loved how she talks about how she learned something for herself. So Amanda herself, is always the student. And then she takes what she learns and she teaches it to her students in meaningful ways. Like, how awesome is that? And I know that every time that I learn something new, I can't wait to tell my students. So thank you, Amanda, for the awesome interview. So now your exit ticket for today is to go check out Educalm Teacher. So to do so, you can go to www.educalm.com/teacher, and we will also put it in the show notes. And this course will be the perfect way to kick off 2019. You'll learn to mindfully take care of yourself during the school year in order to feel your best and be your best. And you'll do this by understanding how habit formation works and then using that knowledge to create those good habits. And best part is you will be held accountable. So Emily, one of our Educalm Teacher alumni, said, "I really learned how to take control of my own emotions by creating routines that set me up to feel calm and joyful despite the events of the day. I noticed such a difference in myself and how I react to annoyances and difficulties my days bring, and in my ability to prioritize my own self-care." So guys, registration is officially open, and it will be open until January 10th. Looking forward to this course. Now, what are we up to this week? Kind of on the same wavelength of last week. We are getting our ducks in a row to take some time off, which will be nice. Kaylee and I both plan on reading fiction for the first time in a very long time, and I'm so excited to get my nose in a book. So yeah, we're just kind of wrapping things up for the year. Also, we are making sure to be organized so that it's not kind of chaotic when we come back. We've got quite a few workshops the week that we get back from our holiday. So we're just getting organized for that. And that's pretty much that. Now, we have decided to take 2 weeks off of podcasting to really kind of immerse ourselves in this vacation that we are going to take. This is how we are prioritizing our own self-care. So this is the last episode that you will hear until we'll be back on January 7th. We'll be back with Charlotte Jackson, an author of a book, on January 7th. And until then, we hope that you have the most wonderful winter break. Make some time for self-care. Have fun with your families and your friends, and just enjoy life. And we will see you in 2019. See you on the other side.
Hey there, Balanced Educator. We appreciate you and the work that you're doing in the world. We are here to support you, so we've created a free resource library for you to use anytime you want. Resources for mindfulness for you and your kiddos at home or in the classroom. You can get these free resources by going to www.educalm.com/The Balanced Educator. Again, that's www.educalm, that's spelled educalme.com/The Balanced Educator. Thank you for being a part of our Educalm community.